Okay. Thank you, fellow board members. We're going to move on to item number 11, information items. We will start with item 11A, update on district facilities project by Mr. Greg Fromm, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. Mr. Fromm, you're on.
Thank you and good evening. Tonight we're going to present, we're going to start off by giving a historical background of what brought us here today based on questions that we had at the last board meeting for the rebuild of El Rancho High School. First slide here represents a special board meeting that took place on the 20th of June 2017, over a year and a few months ago. On that day, the programming document had identified that the current high school would likely exceed the $168 million allocated for the project. The board approved on that date the schematic design, but it was also made out there that it was probably going to go above the 168. That happened on June 20th, 17. More historical background. There was a leadership meeting 2 months after that on the 17th that identified that the design was going to go over $200 million. If you look at what this information here, what was presented at that leadership meeting, the outcome there, the team gave the direction to regroup and reduce the scope and phasing to bring the cost down. As you can see there, those are three building people that gave their estimates based on phases 1 and 2, phases 1 and 2 with escalation costs, phase 3 with escalation costs, phase 4, and phase 4 with escalation costs, where the far right column goes up to $250 million. After that, there was another leadership meeting on the 6th of September. At that date, the group met with the leadership team after reduction in scope to identify the revised design construction estimates was approximately ranged from $192 million to about $230 million project costs. The team was directed at that time to move the schematic design phase with the understanding that they would need $200 million plus state matching funding to complete. That was what was discussed at that meeting on the 6th of September a year ago. December 14th of that year, the project team had a special board meeting on that day. It was a board workshop. The PowerPoint slides with the phasing and project costs were presented as part of the schematic design presentation. The total build-out was identified on that day as $230 million total. The board approved the schematic design 4.0 and directed the team to move on to design development. Bringing us up to today. We looked at where we're at and we looked at the various options that are out there for us. So option number A or 1 here is a total cost of $220 million. And if you look at it, everything in there except for the yellow down below is the rebuild. The yellow below, that is the XYZ and CTE and BAPA, that would just be redoing those current facilities. That would not be a rebuild. Total cost of that is $220 million. That's assuming state matching funds. And it shows on there what all the rest of it, that has new buildings and science, no lead or well certification. That's option A. Now, I like to point out is matching funds aren't necessarily guaranteed. So we won't want to go forward with a cost assuming we're going to get matching funds. Because if those don't come in, where's the money going to come from? And that is something where we're at. There's two ways that you usually approach that. One is you go out for those funding to match from the state before you start to build. And then you know what you get and then you move forward with it. Or option two, which we're doing, we're going to build, and then we try to get funds to match, and then those dollars will come back to us and we'll go back and replace the dollars that we spent out of ER. So since this has already begun, option one really isn't an option in terms of for the state matching fund. And there are no guarantees as well. There's no guarantees. By the time we get there, our application ends, the funds could be all drawn up. Option B. This is a full build out at an estimate of $200 million. What you see on there, all of it's rebuild, brand new, except once again for the yellow down at the bottom of the left. That is your X, Y, and Z buildings, and those will just be redone. Same with the gym as well, and the wing alongside the gym. So you'd have new field, new wings up top, but the gym will just be redone, and the CTE buildings and X, Y, and Z will be redone. Approximately $200 million there. Option C, 168. For 168, we would reduce back, and you would see up there what you get the new science buildings and classrooms up at the top there. New building B, classrooms for special education, administration. New building E, home team rooms, concession, restrooms. New building F, new building C, and new D. All the rest of it that's up there in the gray would remain. Next slide represents the cash flow scenarios for all three of those. Here's something that I want to point out, which is not on the slide, but I have the information here. The tax rate for Measure ER has a tax rate of approximately $100 per assessed value of $100,000 on homes and that. However, that tax rate is only good up to $148 million withdrawn of those funds, from those bond funds. Once we go above that, that tax rate will have to increase. And since it was passed on a 2/3 vote, that Measure ER, it doesn't have to go back out to a vote, but it would have to go to a board approval to raise the tax rate above the $100 that was written into the Measure ER. That's how much. 148.8 is the exact amount to have to increase the tax rate, and that. Option D, which we really don't have cost to, that would be nothing being rebuilt, everything being redone using the current frames that we have and going in. There's no, we can't put a dollar amount on that because that would require a whole redesign and new plans and a new start. So there's really, we can't really put a cost on that to be fair to it, in that. But it's not going to be as cheap as we would expect. So if that's the direction we decide to go, then the whole new set of plans will be like basically starting over. Now, I think where the confusion has happened, if we go back to board meeting on the 14th, there was a vote taken to approve the schematic design. I believe it's the 14th. Yes, on the 14th. And it passed at a vote of 4-0 with Mr. Lara not being here. However, what really should have been on that board agenda item was the cost of the schematic design, and that was not put on there.
Yep.
So the miscommunication happened at that point, in my opinion, based on looking into what has happened in the past, that the schematic design was approved with the assumption or assuming that the cost was approved as well. But the board item just says to approve the schematic design, and there was a cost attached to that. So I think that's what brought us up to this point now, where there's a lot of questions that has to be had of where we're at, how much that has been spent. We've talked about that, and going forward, so a decision needs to be made, the direction going forward. And my recommendation is, before we can decide that, we have to decide how much we want to allocate for this project before we can move forward. Any questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions, but if any of my fellow board members would like to go before me, you're welcome to. Okay, so I'm looking at the, and I do have the history with this process because I've been involved in every meeting. And I'm looking at the meeting, I'm looking at what we told the taxpayers. Basically, we told the taxpayers when we went out, and I can provide the exact wording. I didn't memorize it, but if you look at the resolution, basically we told the community that if they would commit $200 million, that the high school could be rebuilt, but that was only one. $168 million would go towards that. The other would be used to handle projects in the other schools. The community made a decision that they wanted to allocate that money with the understanding that we were telling the community that the buildings at the high school were needed to be replaced and unmodernized. That all of the buildings in the high school, with the exception of the new gymnasium, needed to be replaced. So because we don't have a structural report assessment,
Correct.
I think that was misleading. Because how can we tell the community that when, a lot of the schools in, for example, I worked at Whittier Union High School District. The schools in Whittier Union High School was built in 1900. Most of the buildings are from the 1920s to 1930s. All of the other schools were built the same year as El Rancho. As a matter of fact, Cal High is a replica of El Rancho High School. So there's no structural assessment of that. The other concern that I have is that, as you mentioned, these meetings that you mentioned here, I was in part of those meetings, and I remember one meeting in particular, the one where, and I believe it was either the August of September or September 2017, and Mr. Orozco, you were at that meeting as well. When we were presented with a plan, we meaning the board members that were there and the committee that was there, that exceeded the allocations for the high school. And I was very angry. And I said, no, that's not what we told the community. We told the community that we had so much money. After the meeting, I talked to the CBO at that point, and I said, how can I hear from Mr. Ortiz and the architects that we're going to need over $200 million when we don't have that money? He said, Dr. Villon, the budget is 168, and the architects are going to have to work within those parameters. So, and I do have records of that meeting. I have checked with Mr. Monach to make sure that I'm not misinterpreting what he said, and he confirms that. So every step of the way, the board members have expressed the concern on the cost and us being able to deliver to our community what we told our community we would deliver. What I'm hearing today is that that's not the case based on your plans. Again, you don't have the history, so I'm not blaming you, but we're basically saying that right now. And I am very concerned with that.
Yeah, you are correct, and I'm jumping on this train as it's heading down the road. I wasn't here from the beginning, so the historical I'm just getting from people that were here and speaking to them, and just my perspective on it and looking at it is the approach that really needed to be taken first is the decision to set in stone how much we're going to spend on that. And then once we decided that, then you move forward with your plan design and your schematic with that dollar amount in hand, saying this is what it is. And then we're presented with options to see, okay, we're allocating this is what that amount gets us. From what I'm reading here and what I'm seeing here, that was not the case. What was approved was a design, to go forward with a design, and that's where the discrepancies is, and that design has a cost that's above 168, you know, and that's where, I don't know the miscommunication. I was not here. All I can present is where we're at currently and a little bit of the background of where we're at, but the bottom line is 168 is not going to get the complete rebuild of El Rancho High School.
Or 200 million, that's not going to get us there either.
No.
Okay, I have more comments, but I want to give my fellow board members an opportunity before I make any more comments. Board members?
Yeah. So I was at all the meetings as well, and I was sitting there right next to Dr. Villon when we went through this. And yeah, was I a little upset that we went over 168? But when we went on this campaign and we decided to go after this bond, we did a survey. We were very diligent in the work that we did, since you're not aware. We did the surveys. We surveyed the community first before we even decided to move on this. When the campaign went out, it was very clear that it was $200 million to rebuild El Rancho High School. The community that we went out and talked to, and I was out there talking to the community, and I've been out there at the parks, all three of them, and they want to rebuild. They want the money to be used to rebuild El Rancho High School. That is what the community is asking for. That is what they asked for. They understood the 200 million. They didn't know the specifics, even though we did explain it to them in detail as we went to each community, went to the senior citizens, went to all the parks, talked to all the community members that were part of this process. And when we went to that meeting, the leadership meetings, it was very clear to us that 168 million wasn't necessarily what was promised at the time. It was 200 million that we were going to use. We didn't want to use all 200. We thought that we'd have money left over to use it for other projects. But the community voted for 200 million, so we were okay with it. When we approved the schematic design, because that is what we approved, and it was very clear that we were approving a schematic design, that would mean that if we approve the schematic design, the costs were going to be what it was informed to all of us. And we were all there and we voted on it. It was very clear in terms of the historical proceeds. So where are we at now? With all that being said and done, we've approved, we went through this whole process. And now we're at this point, okay? So my question is we've done everything in regards to the schematic design that we've already approved. We're coming up on a year that we've approved it. We've done all the necessary procedures in order to get us to this point where we're ready to actually start moving on the high school and getting things done. We've already spent a certain amount of money, X amount of money. We are delaying this process, which is adding to the escalation costs. I believe it was, what was that number you said last time?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
I think it was around $20,000 a day. So by being 2 weeks past, moving past, we've already cost our taxpayers $200,000 because we're delaying this process, which we've already approved a year ago and already set up for this entire process. So my question is, if we decide to do, or if my colleagues decide to move in a different direction, how much money are we costing the taxpayers in the fact that we've already spent money on this particular design, and in addition, by delaying the project even more so, how much are we costing taxpayers in the end as we go out and build, as we get to the end of the projects? So those are my questions.
Those are good questions, and I would have to go back and calculate that, you know, and I think that will be more determined on what direction we decide to go forward with in that. So I would have to bring that information back to you. But right now, where we're at right now is we had the bids come in for the demolition of the wings in the front of the school. Those are just the bids. They have not been open. They've not been accepted. We've paused that, but we have all those bids. And then we have the bids that have come in for the leaseback, which would require us to do the process there, but that has been stopped. So we haven't set up the dates to screen those and interview and select. So there's no money being spent right now because of the fact that there's nothing going forward. There's nothing. We're to the point right now where we've done what we've said we're going to do. The delay is the cost that we'll add on to if we delay and then decide to go forward with the demolish, because those costs will change as we go forward. The lease back, if we delay, those costs will change. Well, eventually, if it's delayed longer, we'll have to reopen it up, rebid for both of those, because those bids won't be any valid anymore. So it all depends on what direction we decide to go in.
So the follow-up is, how much have we spent already, right?
Right.
How much have we spent already? And if we decided to go in a totally different direction, that's money that's already spent. Like, we can't recover what we already spent. And those are the things that concern me.
Right.
We've already spent the money. So if we move in a different direction and start over, then we're going to basically start from scratch again. And then all the money that we spent is gone. And that's the bond money that we promised to our residents.
Possibly, but not all of it. Some of the money went to the redesigning of those suites that we currently have that we redeveloped and that. But there's other costs that, if plans change, you have to get new designs, and those are very costly too. So it does have an effect. If the direction would to change, there will be a monetary effect to that of increased cost.
Dr. Merino? And then Ms. De La Vega.
I have several questions. I don't know if I can get them in 3 minutes, but I will try. Going back from September 16, 2017, there's some if you flip, well, there it is. You flip back, and the numbers that are there, and I don't recall, I don't know if these numbers were presented to us at that time, but all these figures are definitely under $200 million. And
Right. Those are just the hard costs. They don't consider the soft
correct
costs as well.
What I'm saying is, I don't recall those. Well, those numbers are still under $200 million. However, when you move forward to the December 14, 2017, that was a schematic that was approved without any numbers attached to it. But now we see a $230 million total cost that's there now.
Right.
Which is something we didn't have. And what I'm saying here is that for a very long time and in numerous times, we have been asking for actual numbers. And even tonight, what I'm hearing tonight are just general terms in terms of cost and how much is going to escalate. But we have no hard numbers that we can go on, even tonight.
No, the options have the hard numbers to them.
Right, but they're coming here, and all of them are way and above what we can afford. So my question is, if initially we went out for $200 million, the taxpayers approved that, and then we went on to say 168 will be spent for the high school. All of these schematics, all of these designs that had no numbers attached to it, why were they even considered if they were above the amount that we had already assigned to be spent on the high school? And I know this is before your time, right. But see, these are the very questions that have been coming up time and time again. And so even tonight, I feel that we're here and we're being asked to make decisions, and we don't have hard numbers here. Now, we are committed to delivering the high school, and we have to make some decisions. And I understand that each day that we delay this project, it's going to cost us a lot of money. However, how can we move forward when we really do not have checks and balances in place? Mm-hmm. The costs, the expenditures are really running wild. And so I rather see halting what we're doing now so that to give you an opportunity to really take control, review the budget, review the expenditures, and really put those checks and balances in place. I have to say it, I have to put it out there. It has been mismanaged simply because the decisions that have been made by this board have been made given with the information that we had at that time. And so the community came forward with many concerns, and we are coming forward with many concerns. And I think that it's time that we really take a step back and really see what we can honestly deliver. Where we are, I really don't know how much has been spent, and I know some has been spent in other projects.
Around $4 million.
Okay. And so, and I'm looking at this with no lead and well certification, which is something we really didn't need in the first place, which is good to have. I'm not saying no. But my understanding, and I don't even have the numbers, and I have requested that information. We have about $100,000 has been spent on lead and well, and now we're what's before us are all these options with no lead and well. So we have $100,000 down the drain, and so what I'm saying is, let's continue with the residual projects that are at hand, and let's take a look at what we really need to do and how we need to move forward. Because, yeah, we're hoping for state matching funds, but as you said it, that cannot be guaranteed. How much do we have left? What can be delivered with what we have? And more important, I'll close it up right now. Do we really need to demolish all those buildings? I don't even know. I can't even get the... I can't even get the actual assessment data for the buildings. It's embedded in the software. Well, yeah, but let me see it. I don't have access to the software. Do we really need to demolish all those buildings?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. So I cannot vote to demolish any buildings or continue with any construction until I have all the information that I need to make an informed decision that is going to deliver what we promised to the community. Thank you, and I apologize for the time.
Ms. Delao?
Can I respond? Tonight's just information. We're not here to take a vote. Going forward, the next steps, we would have to have a special board meeting of a study session to dive deep into everything in that. But the one thing that you brought up was budget. We need to set one. That's the huge problem. That's the outlying things. We have schematic designs, and the reason why these costs keep going up, because the first slide is based on the schematic design that was approved, and that. So that's where we based it, and then we scaled it down a little bit to give some more information of what gives you what in that. But what we don't have is we don't have a budget set to say this is what we're going to spend, no more. Until we have that, we're kind of like in no man's land, to be honest with you, because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to move forward, because if we go based on a schematic design, those costs change and they go up because we approved the design. What we need to do is approve the cost and then build the design around that. And we kind of did it backwards. And now we need to fix it. The bottom line, it needs to be fixed. Because the numbers don't lie. We can't afford to do what the schematic design was approved to do.
Ms. Delao, it's your turn, and then I'll...
Okay, the taxpayers here in the community, they passed this bond thinking a 200 million. And it's right what Dr. Merino says. We need, and I know this is all before you.
Right.
So it's nothing personal.
I know.
But, we're speakers of the community on this bond, and we can't go forward. It's going to cost us, and what a shame. And shame. Because nothing was transparent. Exact figures were not given to us. And now we were sort of told we're going to get a whole brand new high school in the beginning. But that is, in fact, not true. We need to save the money. And not all the residents want a brand new high school. Not all the residents. You'll get a pro and a con. I hear tradition. I hear, I went to El Rancho and this is how it is. We've got to save money for our taxpayers. They believed in us. They believed in us, and we have to deliver. And we have to deliver transparent, honest, and true figures to them. This is not Mickey Mouse. This is not Disneyland. This is El Rancho High School, and it's concrete. And not all of them, again, not all of them want a brand-new high school. It's going to cost us, but I want to put a halt to it. I want to stop it now and get all the figures compiled, what's the cost, and what's really necessary. What's necessary, and what are the needs of the kids.
Here's where I see my role in this. My role is to give the board all the information. And then the board to say, this is how much we're going to spend. And then it's my job to make sure we only spend that amount through checks and balances, being on top of things, being involved with it. That's my role. My role isn't to say, I think you should tear down, you should rebuild. My job is to give you the information based on the questions that were asked and what will happen based on the information that we currently have. With your direction, once we set the amount that we want to spend, then it's my job to make sure we stay within that amount through checks and balances and stuff like that. And I relate it to this. We know what we want. We want something better for the students at El Rancho High School. Bottom line is, however, we can do anything we want, and I say this a lot, but we can't do everything we want. So we have to make sure that we're all on the same page, and the direction you give is the direction that I will go with my team and make sure that we stay within the amount that the board says this is what we're going to spend. That's
And we got to bring it back to the taxpayers so they can see the exact figures, the exact money, the profit and loss, the revenue, everything that's going to be spent. They deserve that. They deserve that. So to put a halt and even to change the company, if we have to do that, I'm for that.
And I think, and I don't know if this information was presented to you prior to, but just some tax rate information. El Rancho Unified is currently one of the highest combined tax rates for outstanding bonds in LA County at 191 per 100. A thousand, and our assessed value is only 4.8 billion. And we have currently out in bonds we have $314 million out in bonds. And the next nearest tax rate to us at 135 is Montebello, and their excess value is almost 16 billion, and they have almost a half a billion out in bonds. So our tax rate is very high. And as I pointed out before, Measure ER will not be able to keep that tax rate at what the voters voted on at the 100 per 100,000 if we cash in all 200. And the way it sits right now, without the bonding capacity waiver, that will be years down the road before we. So those are all things that factor in. And when we have a study session, you have to have all the information to make a sound decision going forward. And I don't believe you've been given all that information.
No.
I wasn't here, so I don't know.
Right.
But the information that I have is relevant to how we want to proceed going forward, and to give the community and to give the board El Rancho High School that we want our students to have.
Well, I just want to tell you that when you said we didn't set a budget, we did set a budget. And I was part of every meeting. And Manoj did have a budget. He said 168 million, we'll tell the architects. There was a vacuum left after him. So we did set a budget of 168, possibly the 200, if that's what the board chose to do. But that was very clear to us that we knew we had a budget and we needed to stay within that budget. Somewhere along the line, people just went shopping with $5 and shop for 200 million when we can only afford 240 million. That's unacceptable. But I do, before we end this, I do wanna ask Mr. Aguilera Ford some of my questions, and you send those questions to us as board members. They were not answered tonight. Facilities condition. What are we going to do about that? The assessment. The other question is, I asked for you to provide information to the board on how much money we have spent on lead and well. We don't have those figures.
Okay, the lead and well, I don't have that information. I don't have in my notes that the specific lead and well was requested. I will follow up on that. All the questions that were asked were actually consulted, and those were responded in today's presentation. There is no structural assessment of El Rancho High School as of today. It hasn't been done since this project was approved.
The other question that I have is social media. Why are we spending $15,000 a month for social media?
We are not spending $15,000 a month. Are you looking at with the project ER, the ER measure? Those costs will need to be explained within the costs already included in the budget of the management company.
The other question that I had was the methods that have been used for selecting consultants within the bid or whatever it is. We don't understand. I need to know what methods have been used to select the different consultants that have been used for the ER or for the innovation labs or whatever. I don't have that information.
May I respond to that one? I did send to the board the process that was explained to me by the board president about how did the board decide at some point to select consultants. And all of that, all the consultants, as far as I know, based on the information that was provided to me, have been followed the process that the board has decided, in which include the ad hoc committee formed by the board president and any other board member that the board has approved.
I am talking about the consultants that have been hired by HPLE. Whether it be the asbestos or the all of the other consultants that the ad hoc committee has not been involved in.
Okay, those are hired by the management company based on the contract that the management company has with the Rancho Unified School District, which was approved in 2016.
Okay, so a couple suggestions is it'd be nice if we had maybe some comparables, because I think the journey that we decided to take was the journey that nobody has taken. So, but I know there's been some schools that have been built in LA. There's been some schools that have been built. I think it would be good to have some comparables on what this brings you, or how much this brings you, or what does this look like at this cost. I don't. I disagree with Dr. Villon that we had $168 million set as a budget. I believe that was discussed, and I believe, to your point, Mr. Fromm, that no, we didn't actually specifically have an official budget. We have not, and I do believe that we were guided by the previous CBOs and the previous cabinet. That was those that guided us, because obviously they were in the meetings with us. But I think moving forward, that would help in terms of, okay, what does this, because when we were asked and we discussed these things with the staff, with the students, the teachers, and the parents that were involved in the steering committee, it was basically, okay, what do you want? What do you want? And if this is what you want, this is what it looks like, and this is what it costs. So that was asked, and everybody who was at that steering committee meeting, everybody gave, hey, and said, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want, this would be great, blah, 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 blah. But I think comparables, and then I think we would have a better idea in terms of what does this look like, right?
Can I respond to that? In my past experience in my previous place that I worked, we had a bond that we went out and we were building 2 new schools with. One was a total tear down, one was a brand new school. And the process that we did was the board set aside, okay, we're allocating $25 million for this school, 35 for this. And then we went out, as you talked about there, and we talked to the people of those communities, what they wanted, and the list came up, put everything down. Then we tallied it all up, and now we got the cost compared to what we set it at, and now what we want to do all this it is. And then the decisions had to be made, okay, are we going to raise it up, or are we going to what are we going to cut back to get down to this and that? I wasn't here, but from what I'm hearing, I don't think that was done here. I think we asked everything we wanted,
Yep.
and then the design was built, and then the design was approved, and now this is the cost of it, where the cost needed to be set first, and then taking all that in so people could see, okay, we want all of this, but it's going to cost this. What are we going to give and take? What are we going to do before we even go out and put all those plans to design? In my opinion, we went at it the wrong way. That's in the past, but now we got to correct that going forward.
Just one last thing. So I'm very glad that you have put a stop to everything. I think that's the right thing to do at this point. I also know that there are a couple of people, or former CBAC people who have contacted the district attorney. So the last thing I would want this board to do is to get ourselves into any trouble. So I would really recommend that we halt demolition, that we halt everything until we establish protocols and something that's transparent that we know we have the figures correct, that we have transparent protocol. Until then, I don't think we should move forward with anything. Yes.
Just want to make a final comment, and it's true. I agree with the comparables, because otherwise we'd be operating in a vacuum. And, we have no structural assessments, so why are we even tearing buildings down if we have no structural assessment whether they need to be torn down or not? But what I like to say now is that, you're on board. You have now the responsibility to really stay on top of all these costs, to review all expenditures, to ensure that they are cost-effective, they're efficient. And I just want to leave you with this. Make sure that, I don't care whether it's a chair or a podium, that it is, first of all, allowable, allocable, and necessary, and it's reasonable. And if it's not, send it back. And that all expenditures, anything, any purchase order, that it has to be approved and go through you before and not after the fact.
We're putting checks and balance in place, and we have a plan, and that's going to be corrected. But you made a good point about the furniture, and that's what I'm talking about. When you set a budget, you set all those limits within there, and then when it comes time to that, you work within what you have, and then you come up with options based on what the need is and based on what you have to spend there, in that. So the process needs to start, or when it resumes, is what is the dollar amount we're going to set, and then build from there. Until we have that, we're going in no direction at all, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. DeLo.
Within this process that we're going to start now, and start from the gate again, this board, we have to fulfill our promise, our obligation, responsibility on this bond to the residents. They went out in faith and to vote for it. We can't turn away. We've already lost money already, and they're angry about it. I'm angry, and we have to do right by this. We have to do right.
Like I said, and before we move on to the next presentation that I have to do, I wasn't here in the past, so I can't comment on that because I wasn't here. I can just repeat or bring up what happened.
It was before my time, still.
But I'm here now,
Yeah.
and I know what direction we need to go, and I know what checks and balances need to be put in place. As more information, I find out more information and stuff like that. Like I said, we go on the direction of the board, and then we make sure the direction you give us, we stay within that direction. So I think a board study session will be recommended to the board so we can dive deep in there, and from at that time, then the direction will have to be given to us. Which direction to go based on what the board decides.
Thank you, Mr. Fromm. And just the last comment I'd like to make is that the board, we're only responsible for supervising the superintendent. We're really not responsible for supervising you. So, Mr. Aguilera Ford, when we ask you for budget information, I would appreciate if you give it to us in a timely manner.
Dr. Villon, that's why I do work with the staff, so that the staff that is assigned to do those duties, but if you want in person me to present that information, I will be more than happy to do so.
No, when I send an email requesting budget information.
I choose not to respond right now. The public doesn't need to know
Need to
these
move on.
items. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fromm.
I'm going to stay up here. I got another presentation. Okay, it's that time of the year again, and it's not back to school, and in our budget cycle, it is our reporting of our 2018, 17, 18 unedited actuals. That's where we are today. If you look at our cycle as we go through it, and it's constantly changing, it does not stop. The next time I'll be up here presenting will be in December, where we'll have the first interim report. And then in March, we'll have the second. And then in June, we will adopt our LCAP and our budget for the 2019-20 school year. And it just repeats, just the years will change on there. Here's where we're at with our revenues. We're talking unrestricted, restricted, and combined. Unrestricted, they came in at 72 million, restricted 28.2 for a combined 100.2 million dollars. Now, when we come to our expenses for unrestricted were 71.5 million, 29.6 million for restricted, and combined 101.1. Now, that represents a deficit spending of 900,000. Now, that is simple. It's from contributions that we have to take out and put it into the special funds, and our main contributions that we have to make are special education. Sorry, Dean, not your fault. It's just the nature of the system in the state of California is we don't get enough funding to be able to meet the needs of our special education students. So that is why we have to make that contribution to the general fund, out of the general fund. So that leaves an combined ending fund balance of $18.1 million for last year. Our revenues, if you break it down, 4% of them go to local, 7% is other state, 6% is federal money, and that leaves 83% of our dollars come from LCFF funding. Break it down here is where all our money goes to. If you look on the slides there, the biggest chunk of our money goes to certificated salaries. The second biggest chunk of our dollars go to classified salaries, and the third biggest chunk of our money goes to employee benefits. That's the way it is in all school districts, and that the biggest chunk of your dollars go to people. And that is why, as we move forward, we want to be able to control those costs and be cautious when we add new positions, if it's a need or if it's a want, and if we can sustain it down the line. Because one of the other things that we don't get more funding for from the state is the increased cost to PERS and STIRS. Those are rising costs that we can't control. So we have to make sure that people we do hire are need-based, and they're not a want, they're a need, and we stick within our allocations that we have. The quickest way that we can really go south is overstaffing, so we really need to keep an eye on that. And as we look forward to our stabilization plan, we're going to look, that's the first place we need to look, is our staffing at our sites and our departments, and that, and make sure they're aligned. Next steps, we'll take this for approval tonight as action. And then the unedited will be certified in December, and then we will present back in December. You'll see my face again here, with our first interim report. Any questions?
For members?
Yeah, I have a question. Can you explain other local revenue? What does that consist of?
Sales tax, things along that line.
Just sales tax?
General things locally that bring in, could be taxed out, sales tax and items like that. It's a bunch of different things that we get locally.
Do you know what that is?
Broken down, and I can get that.
Yeah, because that's $4 million. I'm looking at it's 4%, but it's $4 million. That can pay people $4 million. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I can break it down what all comprises that number.
Mr. Fromm, we're also looking at a deficit within the next year or two of 2.5 million, is it 2 million, 2.5? So what, I know you mentioned staff, overstaffing, it has to be a needs instead of wants. What other measures are we putting in place to try to alleviate that deficit? And when I hear deficit, it scares me because when I first came into the board, we were facing a $6.2 million deficit. So I want to know what is being put in place to try to alleviate that.
Well, there's two ways to address it. Number one is cut costs, or number two, bring in more dollars. You know, and the way you bring in more dollars to our schools is, number one, have more kids come to the school district. You know, so there's a ways that we can attract more students here. You know, and just what we offer our students. We're in today's world where all the school districts are so close, kids can have a choice. Well, I don't like what this high school has to offer, I'm going to go over to this high school. You know, making sure we stay up with the needs of the students in that, because they'll leave if they don't like what we have to offer if school next door has the same. So we have to stay on top of that to keep our students and attract more in. Also, what we need to do is we need to get the students that go to school here to school. We need to increase those daily rates of showing up to school. That will help a lot. And we have to look at costs, and as we build this plan for the spring when we bring it to the board, is I'm going to be with my staff going through our staffing in the school district, you know, based on how many teachers, how many positions we have. We have to look at it to make sure that we stay within that. And if there's an area that needs to be corrected, then we have to decide how we're going to do it. Are we going to do it through when people retire and leave, not replace, once we go through all that? So the main way, we're not going to be able to correct this by saying by paper, don't do this. That's nickel and diming things. We have to look at the biggest outgo of our dollars, and that's expenses to people, you know. So, and what I mean is it has to be a need, not a want. So if the request comes through, say, well, we want this position here. Okay, is it budgeted first off? If it's not, why? Is it a need? Do we have the students to warrant the position and stuff like that? There are some positions that are a need because they lower costs and they save us money, you know, so all those things need to be looked at. I haven't delved into position control yet to really look at all the positions and where they're at, but that's where the process is going to start, you know, and then we'll form a group of people and present our recommendations to the board of how we attack this so we can get in line. You know, we have some time to get there, but we want to put a plan in place in that. And the biggest thing is, you know, COLA right now is not helping us because we're losing more dollars because of the loss of students and the kids coming to school than we gaining from the cost of living that the state currently gives us, and that.
Thank you, Mr. Fromm. Thank you very much.
I have another question, I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Before you do, have you asked a question already?
I did.
Do you have a question, or do you have a question before? Okay, go ahead.
No, and I worked for LAUSD, and I was at an elementary school, and we had a principal who basically put the numbers, and I mentioned this to Mr. Galindo when I first got on the board, was he put the numbers of the attendance rates of the students, and he put the numbers lost, and he put it right there on the front gate of revenue lost when students are absent. And I asked Mr. Galindo, hey, is that an idea? Is that possible? Just a suggestion, and I know that over there they're always sending us memos about, you know, not missing work and not being late for us as employees. I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just suggesting that if everybody knows, if staff knows and the parents know what it actually costs us, if they see, like, if our attendance rate is at this amount and we're losing this amount of money, I do think that for some parents that are paying attention, I do think it makes a difference in terms of they actually see the dollar amount when their student is absent or their student is late and how it impacts our budgets. I brought that up before. So.
Right, and the biggest thing that brings kids to school is engagement. You know, kids come to school when, number one, they know there's adults there that care about them. You know, kids will want to come to school, you know. And two, a good way to attack that is incentive based. You know, we could have the school which is the highest gets an award, or, you know, I know school districts that have done this too. They, at the high school level, if you're there every day, you're so many things in, and there's car dealerships that donate a car to raffle off. So those are the ways we can attack that too. It's good to make us as adults aware of those, but for kids wanting to get up to go to school, that, you know, the top reason that they go is that person that's in the classroom, that person that's in the cafeteria, the person that drives the bus. So that's why it's important that we keep and retain the quality people that we do have and attract more quality people here that want to do great things for kids, and that's what's going to help that as well.
Engaging parents as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Fromm.
Studies.
Can't spend enough time up here.
We're going to go